Hello everyone, it is your Peacekeeper coming at you with the next video in our How to Play series on the US Cruiser line, and this is going to be the last video for this. This is the Tier 10 Des Moines class cruiser. The Des Moines class cruiser was a class of 3 completed and 12 planned heavy cruisers built in 1945 and commissioned in 1948 and 1949. The 3 completed cruisers were the Des Moines, Salem, and Newport News. This class is the last class of all-gun cruisers built by the U.S. Navy and was based on a slightly upsized Baltimore hull design with improved machinery layout and armor protection. The biggest change between Baltimore and Des Moines, though, is the addition of the 8-inch 55 caliber Mark 16 auto-loading guns and the replacement of the 40mm Bofors with the 3-inch 50 caliber Mark 33 anti-aircraft guns. Those 8-inch 55 caliber Mark 16 guns had a rate of fire of 10 rounds per minute and could load and fire at any angle. As an interesting side note, the high-capacity common rounds could be equipped with a manual fuse, which would allow them to be used as an anti-aircraft gun for long-range anti-aircraft, although they were never used as such in real life. The entire gun assembly proved to be one of the most reliable automatic gun mounts ever produced. However, the Newport News did suffer a fatal explosion in her number 2 turret during a fire mission in Vietnam, which killed 20 crewmen. It was the result of a round detonating in the barrel. The 3-inch 50 caliber anti-aircraft guns represented a massive improvement to the already impressive 40mm Bofors in terms of anti-aircraft lethality. What they were finding was that a 40mm, while very effective at shooting down aircraft, could not get the reliable shoot downs that they were needing to take care of the kamikaze threat in the Pacific theater. Only the 5-inch 38 caliber guns could do that, and so the 3-inch guns were the smallest shell size that could have the VT, those proximity fuses that were designed by the US, and they had all of these gun barrels laying around for these 3-inch 50 caliber guns that were already being used on destroyers for anti-aircraft duties that didn't have the dual purpose gun mounts. And they figured, well, why don't we put like this awesome automatic loading system onto it? And upon doing so, they found that by pairing this with the already awesome powered gun mounts for the 40mm Bofors, they created one of the most vicious anti-aircraft guns ever designed. Each 3-inch gun itself could fire up to 50 rounds per minute for a total of 100 rounds per minute per each twin gun mount. That was an unbelievable amount of anti-aircraft to be throwing up. Unfortunately, none of these were ever used in World War II, although they did see use on U.S. warships well into the 1980s and are still in service aboard U.S. ships sold to other nations, as well as in the Spanish Navy and the Norwegian Oslo-class frigates. You can actually still see these gun mounts on the USS Salem, which is a museum ship in Quincy, Massachusetts. In terms of their service history, these ships spent most of the post-war years on diplomatic duties, serving U.S. interests throughout the, various areas of the world. Des Moines and Salem spent considerable time in the Mediterranean representing U.S. interests there, and the Newport News handled U.S. interests in the Gulf of Mexico, Western Atlantic, and the Caribbean. In fact, the Newport News was the flagship for the Atlantic Fleet during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Newport News would go on and also see service during the Vietnam War, where she provided shell fire support for troops on the ground. In Vietnam, she fired 59,241 rounds of high-capacity ammo, that's that high-explosive round, and was fired on by shore batteries no less than 17 times. As I said earlier, the USS Salem is still preserved today as a museum ship in Quincy, Massachusetts, while Des Moines was scrapped in 2007 after a failed attempt to turn her into a museum ship, and Newport News was scrapped in 1993. In terms of their in-game gameplay style, you would think that this ship would just be a massive step up from the Baltimore. Unfortunately, I just don't really enjoy this ship that much. I mean, sure, she has some insanely fast-firing 8-inch guns with the typical U.S. armor-piercing ammo with its favorable bounce angles and high damage and high penetration capabilities. She also has the best anti-aircraft suite of any ship in the game and can create a 7.2 kilometer no-fly zone around the ship when a full anti-aircraft build. She's also got good concealment as well as the longest radar duration of any ship in the game at 40 seconds. But there's one thing that this ship lacks that Baltimore doesn't seem to suffer from, and that's the lethality of Tier 10 ships is so high, and the Citadel location on Des Moines, I mean, here, we'll pull up the armor viewer, you can see here. So you can see here, this Citadel sits considerably higher above the water than the Baltimore's does, which is far less above the water in the sections that are actually above the water. And it's a lot longer on Des Moines, too. And so this ship tends to get Citadel'd a lot, and then to add insult to injury, unlike other Tier 10 cruisers, she has a 27mm midship belt armor, as well as 27mm decks, whereas most other heavy cruisers get 30mm. We'll go switch to Zhao here, and I can show you 30mm, 30mm. Yeah, she has 25 instead of 27mm, but we're really not talking about a huge difference in terms of overmatch mechanics there. 16-inch guns will still penetrate the bow of Des Moines quite heavily, and it will also overmatch your midship decks, which is where your massive Citadel is located. So this ship is really soft and squishy. Now, why is Baltimore not as big of an issue? Well, as I already said, the Citadel is physically smaller in terms of the area that's above water, but it's significantly harder to hit, too, from angles, even though it has the same hull thicknesses. And it feels to me like Baltimore is a little bit better, especially since Baltimore sees a lot of Tier 7 games, whereas Des Moines will always see a Tier 10 match. Always. And so, it's hard for Des Moines to really compete, especially when you've got the likes of Mazda, even Hindenburg, which I know isn't doing well in terms of global stats, but you guys have seen the epic battle videos that I put up. The ship is just unbelievable compared to Des Moines. And Zhao, I mean, are you really going to compare with Mazda and Zhao? What about Minotaur? I mean, Minotaur is the rate of fire king as well as the damage per minute king. It just feels like Des Moines really doesn't have anything that sets her apart. And while they did recently buff her rate of fire from that 6 seconds to 5.5 seconds, I can't help but think that's like the wrong thing that they could have buffed. They should have really addressed this 27mm deck and 27mm upper hull armor that makes her so soft and squishy. But let's go ahead and let's dive into those stats. So she has 50,600 hit points. Her armor is 6 inches of belt armor. She does have a torpedo damage reduction of 7%. Her main battery consists of those 9 8-inch 55 caliber Mark 16 auto-loading guns. They do have a rate of fire of 5.5 seconds. With the reload module, you can get that down to 4.8 seconds, and if you throw in Adrenaline Rush, the ship gets some stupid fast 8-inch gunfire. You do see there that you do have a really rather quick turret 180-degree traverse time of 30.4 seconds. Pretty good dispersion and 16% chance of starting fires with 4.8 seconds of reload. I mean, the thing starts fires like crazy, and yes, that is with Demo Expert. And the AP damage is $5,000 a piece, so I mean, you've got plenty of that. You do have secondaries. They will reach out to 6.3 kilometers if you throw advanced firing training on the captain. They are the typical 5-inch 38 cal dual-purpose gun mounts in Mark 32 gun mounts, and you won't ever really see them get used much. Main battery firing range without the range module is 15.8 kilometers. We'll talk about the range module in a little bit. Her anti-aircraft suite is impressive, and it is disgusting how impressive it really is. She has 12 single 20mm Oerlikons, which you might as well just forget ever exist, because nothing ever gets this close to the ship. 2.4 kilometers with AFT. Yeah, you're not going to get anything close to that. Now, this is without the anti-aircraft range module, so you can tack on an extra 20% to this, or basically another half kilometer, call it 3 kilometers when you're all said and done, for those 20mm Oerlikons. But those 3-inch 50 caliber Mark 33s My word, you've got 12 dual gun mounts, but they look at that DPS, 335 DPS, starts at 6 kilometers. That can be bumped up to 7.2 kilometers with the AA range module. Holy cow, that is a lot of anti-aircraft going up. And then if that wasn't enough, you've got 91 DPS in those 5-inch 38 caliber dual purpose guns. That is also pushing out to 7.2. And if you run manual AA, that bumps it up to 182 DPS. Combine the two, and it is a mind-boggling amount of DPS, like 500 some odd DPS, just at 7.2 kilometers. There's very little in this game that makes it through a Des Moines anti-aircraft suite, especially with defensive fire up. In terms of her max speed, it is 34.6 knots. With the speed flag, it is going to be, I think, 33 knots without it. 770 meter turning radius, which isn't really all that great. I want to say that's more than the Baltimore. Yep, it is, by a solid 40 meters there. And 6.9 second rudder shift time, which is respectable. Her concealment range by sea is 10.6 kilometers. That's with Concealment Expert in the concealment module. And her detection range by air is 7.8 kilometers. So the aircraft will spot you for 0.6 of kilometers before they just start melting. So, surprise! Okay, so let's go over those modules. If you are going to run this as a primary gunboat, this is a good set of modules to run. I run main armaments mod 1. The main guns on this ship do get taken out a lot, and so I definitely recommend that as a mitigation for that, especially if you're running expert loader instead of preventative maintenance on your captain. Aiming systems mod 1 in the second slot. If you're going for the anti-aircraft build, AA guns mod 2 would be the one I would choose here to push your 3-inch guns out to 7.2 kilometers. In this third slot, I am running main battery mod 3. If you are interested in playing a little bit less aggressive role, a little bit less close to your detection range, you can run gunfire control systems mod 2, which will push that main battery firing range out 16% more. If you are interested in that anti-aircraft build and you want to just absolutely make carriers cry, here's an additional 25% DPS thrown on top of the already insane DPS of those 3-inch guns and 5-inch guns. In this one, this ship will never be a good secondary ship. Please don't run secondary battery mod 3. Thanks. In the fourth slot, we have Propulsion Systems Mod 1, which is going to reduce the chances of your engines being incapacitated by 20%, as well as decrease the time it takes to repair them by 20%. The only other upgrade here that would be viable is Steering Gears Mod 1, but as I've explained in other videos, I find losing my propulsion system is worse than losing steering gears. At least with steering gears, you're still moving, and you can sometimes get lucky and move into cover. In the fifth slot, Steering Gears Mod 2 is the one I recommend to reduce that rudder shift time to down 20%. If you're interested in playing peekaboo behind islands instead of playing the up-close and personal aggressive playstyle, you could make Propulsion Systems Mod 2 work, but I would highly recommend in this last slot running Steering Gears Mod 3 to get your rudder shift time down so that when you do get in those close-in engagements, and let's be honest, they're going to happen, so when you do get in that engagement, you can actually maneuver between battleships firing at you and minimize the profile you're presenting. I personally run Concealment Systems Mod 1 because I'm running Steering Gears Mod 2, and that's going to reduce the detection range even further, while also increasing the dispersion of shells being fired at me. That's new for this last patch. So those are those upgrades. In terms of those consumables, like I already said, 9.9 kilometers, so basically 10 kilometers on your radar range, but more importantly, having defensive fire as an option, I cannot recommend that. Choosing hydroacoustic search for any reason, especially since radar with premium consumables comes up so fast. But anyway, let's dive into that battle video and we can kind of talk a little bit more about the playstyle in the battle video. Alright, so obviously this battle is going to be a tier 10 battle, so we don't need to worry about that. The total damage is like right around 185,000 damage. If I remember correctly, there's going to be a cyclone that comes in, no aircraft carriers to demonstrate the lol-tastic anti-aircraft of this ship, but like most U.S. cruisers, this ship has a number of different ways it can be played. We are on the map Sea of Fortune, which does favor one of those playstyles, which is going to be the island camper. Personally, I don't particularly care for that playstyle. It's a little too passive for me, but sometimes you have to do it, as if you go back and watch my New Orleans video I did at the end of that battle, simply to keep myself alive while also still doing damage. I don't know. This map is always a hard map to judge because it depends on what your team's going to do. A or C, it doesn't really matter. Both areas are an absolute mess. This map is better than most maps that Wargaming has put out recently, in the sense that there's at least ways to break vision to you. And what I mean by that is that the islands will actually break line of sight frequently. Even though there's these big open areas, there's enough islands clustered around the capture points that the ships that are there have a hard time seeing you. But there's enough open areas that, battleships can kind of play. I don't really care for this map. It seems like this map is a lot of work, and I rarely do all that well on these maps. But this game was a slightly different one. So here's a little bit of self-promotion there. Also, I want to point out that this ship is not running the concealment module. I think I was running the double rudder setup on this one, so my detection range is 11.8 kilometers. This was also before the rate of fire buff. However, the increase in rate of fire really doesn't help this ship out that much. As I've already said once before, the last thing this ship needed was more rate of fire. It wasn't really the DPM that caused the ship to perform so poorly. It's the fact that the ship has absolutely crap survivability compared to the other Tier 10 cruisers. Anybody who's played Zao can tell you that, with its absolutely trollish armor and the fact that if you're nearly completely broadside, you will almost never get citadeled in a Zao. In Des Moines, if you go broadside, you will lose all of your health. If you don't get dev struck right away, it will certainly be over for you quite shortly. If you have the ability to division up with a destroyer, specifically a US destroyer, that would also be of benefit to you. Now, we are detected. There is a Tirpitz over there. Interesting to note, being detected in this ship is really not that big of a concern. But because they are, that Des Moines is over an island and I can shoot over it, I'm going to go ahead and shoot over it. And I've had a couple people say, well, you're just hacking. You can't see over that. You couldn't hit him. Actually, I really could. Once you've played this game enough times, you will get very used to how far below a ship how far below an icon a ship is. Here we slowed down a lot, probably a bit of a mistake, but we are going to go ahead and use our AP on this nearly broadside Missouri. Now he's turning in, so we need to get the heck out of Dodge. Unfortunately, nobody is spotting. And there you can see a number of overpens. We got very lucky. Usually those shells come with a corresponding increase in Citadel hits, mainly because you are presenting a profile in which 16-inch shells of that Missouri would go clean through. If that was that Tirpitz, it might have been that Tirpitz that was shooting at me, and that would explain why the damage was so low. But you can see here, even when that Missouri is bow on, this AP is quite potent. I went ahead and switched to HE, though, because we're going to try and start some fires, especially since he just burned his repair on the flood he received from the torpedo he took. And so this will help us get our damage out. And thankfully, the ship's rate of fire is high enough. Ooh, 4,600 damage. The ship's rate of fire is high enough, and there's enough ships around me tanking damage that I'm being ignored. Which, ignoring a Des Moines and with its rate of fire is a bad idea. But here's Missouri now turning crispy. He has burned his repairs, and see if we can't get another one on him. Maybe switch to some other ships, especially since there's another fire, especially since we've got a Hindenburg and Mogami hanging out back there with broadsides showing. This ship does do really quite well in a typical, I guess you can call it a brawl. The problem that this ship has is every other Tier 10 cruiser has torpedoes. You don't. And so I don't recommend getting too close, or if you do, you need to be like extra cognizant of enemy ships near you, because getting a torpedo is obviously going to be a world-shattering day for you. Okay, so we're going to go, since we're already over here at sea, we've gotten A, which is nice. They all came over here to, duck and weave. Note, 15-inch shells you can auto-bounce. So if you present less than 30 degrees to a battleship that has 15-inch guns or less, you will bounce all of those shells regardless of where they impact. So that is a nice thing. You know, Bismarcks and Tirpitz, their biggest concerns there are going to be the secondaries and torpedoes respectively, not so much the main battery. And so you can actually push those ships. And one other ship that I like to push in this, paradoxically, right now, is the Iowas and Missouris, or even a Montana to an extent if you can catch them like popping out behind an island. You'd be surprised at how quickly you can... Oh, here... Hey, I'm going broadside. That's a paddling. And we got lucky! RNG praised! So we got a Hindenburg coming in over here. Ooh, we like Hindenburgs. Hindenburg is a bit of a tough nut. That's Zao firing. That has to be Zao. Hindenburgs are a bit of a tough nut to crack. The Tirpitz went broadside, so we're switching back to AP. But Hindenburgs can be kind of a tough nut to crack. But there is one thing that they do have, and they do have a citadel. Unlike German battleships, Hindenburg is relatively easy to citadel, especially when he's presenting broadside profiles. It's just a product of where they are, and U.S. cruisers are like the kings of popping the Hindenburg because the shells fall. Whoop! And down goes the Tirpitz. The shells fall at a steep enough angle at most combat ranges that you're going to hit that belt, that incline, that inner incline belt of the turtleback. But to add to it, you've got those favorable auto bounce angles, so it doesn't just bounce when it gets there. And it's very rare to say that that's an advantage, but you know what, it is. And so we are firing at Mr. Hindenburg here. We are not detected due to the fact that there's nothing in range to spot me. But we've got a Des Moines coming out over here, and we are switching to him because, quite honestly, our left flank is falling apart a bit. Even though we are thoroughly raffle stomping them, I'm less concerned with the stuff that's to my right than I am this Des Moines pushing through and going after ships basically unchallenged. We are in cyclone conditions, however, the spotting range is not dropped yet to the point where we can really push that advantage, and we're only up to 80,000 damage, not a whole lot in the way of damage. I guess for a tier 10 battle, we're almost to the server average, but this Des Moines is going to commit a fatal sin. Look at him, and look at my angle to him, and then look at his angle to me. I mean, yep, you're going broadside to another Des Moines. This damage starts stacking up, even though there's not a whole lot of Citadel hits there. Thanks, Atago, jerk. Even though there's not a whole lot of, Citadel hits going on there, there was enough damage to actually take advantage of his positioning, his rather poor positioning. And so now, if we can help with some other ships, we need to do that. We definitely want to present as little of a profile as we can. We've got a Bismarck on the other side of this. We've got another Bismarck. We've got a Hindenburg. A Hindenburg that is oddly broadside to me that I am not engaging. Well, he's not quite broadside, but he's basically presenting that same profile. 103,000 damage. We are now above the server average. And so we will switch to this closer Bismarck, which it looks like he is just... It looks to me like he's backing up. It's hard to tell. Yeah, he's backing up. And bounced a bunch of shells there from him. And 5,400 damage. So when you do get pens, the AP does do pretty good damage, so we can't complain too much. We are going to have... Well, for one, we knew where he was at, and so there's really no reason to stop firing, especially since we knew where he was at. He can't see me, but I've got a trick up my sleeve. See, he shot at me because he thought he could hit me with that. But I've got a trick up my sleeve. When you have radar in a cyclone, your spotting range goes from 8 kilometers to 10 kilometers. while everyone else stays at 8. That is a very powerful tool that is often underappreciated by people who have radar. And so I've popped radar to push that out so I can see him while he is out there. Unfortunately, he pops up towards the end of it, so we're only going to get about 3 salvos here, if that. Okay, so now we've spotted him, but we know where he's at, and he can't see me because of the fact that I've got my radar up and it is a cyclone. But we're going to keep pushing here. We've got a Missouri to help tank. We're up to 123 damage. No kills yet. That's all right. We're doing damage. I mean, we're dissuading people from trying to catch, our ship's broadside. That's for sure. Okay, so we saw where those shells were going to see where they were impacting. That Hindenburg took out our Minotaur. Dang battleship Hindenburg. Very potent ship. You could, if you had the repair party discipline, you could probably take out a Bismarck by yourself in a Des Moines, simply because of the fact that his main guns can't penetrate your bow armor. But if he gets good at all, that he could, in theory, punish you quite heavily. So, whoa! Down goes the Bismarck. So that leaves us with another Bismarck and the Hindenburg as the last 2 ships alive. We've got a long ways to go to make up our damage that I said we were going to hit. And so, yeah, let's get to cracking on that, right? We haven't even taken any real damage yet. This has been kind of a fairly fortunate game in terms of outright damage capabilities. But you can see here kind of some of the gameplay styles, using islands to break line of sight, angling the ship so that you can minimize the amount of damage you're taking, as well as knowing what battleships you can and can't present decent profiles to. Now, just based on this Hindenburg's location on the mini-map, I'm going to go ahead and blind fire. I have an idea of where he's going to end up. We might get lucky here. Oh! What is this? Oh, he held the Hindenburg in the smoke, non-visible. So here's what I'm talking about here. We've got ourselves a Bismarck that's thoroughly distracted right now. He shoots at me. Oh no! You incapacitated my main turret, you jerk. We're about to shoot. Look at that Hindenburg! Get him! Get him! Get him! Put him out of his misery! That Citadel was so close. What are you waiting for? Just shoot. All right, moving back. Oh, he's gonna get away. Okay, well, since we're bow onto this Bismarck, there's not a whole lot he can do. He's actually engaged somebody else. We're gonna get it. Are we gonna put him out of his misery? Come on. Oh, come on. 1 shell hit is all it's gonna take. Well, there was my 1 shell hit, but it didn't do it. And he's going to turn. Oh, Confederate. He's going to turn right into those. And so we have switched targets because we can no longer see him, and it's just simply too difficult to judge where he's at. And, yep, we'll just go ahead and switch back to this Bismarck. We now have all 3 cap points. It is 4 versus 2. It's basically 4 versus, 1. Because that Hindenburg is basically dead. We are on fire, but we're going to hold off on the repair party for a bit, simply because 17 seconds, not a whole lot of time to worry about. The cyclone isn't ended yet, but we know that Hindenburg is somewhere in that, in the cap over there. So we'll just keep firing. I mean, what's the worst that could happen, right? Who knows? We might get lucky. Oh, somebody spotted somebody. And so that Hindenburg briefly popped up on the screen. Have a rough idea of where he was at. Try and shoot. I mean, you got so much ready to fire, it really doesn't even matter. You could get lucky like I did with that, with the that Citadel hit, and actually Citadel him. Otherwise, we'll just... Wow, we actually had enough penetration there to take out his rear gun temporarily. Wow. So one of the big problems is you see here without IFHE in this profile, we're not getting a whole lot in the way of penetrating hits for our main battery, but, you know, it is what it is. This Bismarck, the USS Yorktown, interestingly enough. Oh, there's the Hindenburg. Get him! Get him! I really don't care about you, Bismarck. I want that Hindenburg dead. Especially since he's more of a threat to me than that freaking, than the Bismarck is. It would be nice if you would turn, though. Fine. I will slow down and let you pass. This is... I mean, he's really the one that was in the way. And so I really don't have any qualms about shooting him. In fact, more of a source of irritation for me than anything because of the fact that it basically forced me to bleed off all the speed that I had just to give him the way. And it's like, you came into my space here, buddy. I didn't come into yours. And so Hindenburg managed to get some torpedoes off on the Bismarck. I, again, don't feel bad for him. And there is 185,000 damage right there. And down he goes. So really not a huge game in terms of number of kills, but a lot of damage. We damaged a lot of ships in this match. Surprised we didn't get high caliber thrown in there. Maybe we... Yeah, we did. Okay, I missed it. 185,000 damage. We'll just call it basically that. 2,066 base XP. Only one sink. And there's a detailed report and the credits and an XP screen. Anyway, Des Moines, I much prefer the play style of Baltimore. I kind of like the underdog appeal to Baltimore versus Des Moines. But, you know, Des Moines not a horrible ship by any stretch of the imagination. It's certainly not what Pensacola or New Orleans was. Anyway, I'm your Peacekeeper. Like, comment, subscribe, and thank you for watching.